Thank you so much, David. Hello, everyone. My name is Prathamesh Prabhudesai. I'm a physician by training and the co-founder of SafeBVM. SafeBVM is a medical device startup in the ventilation and airway management sector. We bring the resuscitator functionality closer to the transport ventilator. And for the COVID-19 pandemic, we are pending emergency use authorization. Today, I will be moderating a medical device development panel with our esteemed panelists, Dr. Xiang, Peter Liu, and John Ashley. They bring several years of diverse experience from clinical medicine, medtech industry, and the investment world. Without further ado, let's learn more from them. Can each one of you, starting from Dr. Xiang, give a brief introduction about yourself and your journey in the medical device sector?
Right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm actually, in fact, is in the clinic today. Therefore, I kind of muted my background early on. It is my great honor to be here. Thank you for F50 for organizing this wonderful event. And I've started listening to it since yesterday. Have learned a lot. I can recognize a few familiar faces here, including Peter, who is a longtime friend. It's good to see you here. So myself, I am a pain management doctor at Stanford. I have been in the field in the medical field for more than 20 years. I did residency at Stanford, a fellowship in pain management, and now I've been practicing on a daily basis. I am also the founders of the Society of Chinese American Physician Entrepreneurs in the United States. We have over 500 members with physicians across 50 states, 38 subspecialties. Many of them are involved in creative entrepreneurship for medical device, etc. Myself, my adventures in medical device first initiated as one of the founders for an implantable device for headache treatment. Currently, we are still in the process of developing prototype for migraine treatment. And during that process, I've learned a lot about our communities on the Stanford campus. People who are working on various devices learned that many talented people who are trying to do the great things for the communities. And then I started to get more and more involved in that. Because of those earlier work on medical device and also my daily use of medical device, and I'm very interested in this panel of discussion, and I look forward to learning from all of you. Thank you.
John?
Yes, hello everyone. I'm excited to be participating in the F50 conference, and I've been enjoying all the panels so far and the discussions. I'm a medical device entrepreneur. I've been in this industry for 30 years. My background is as a mechanical engineer with a master's and bachelor's from MIT, and I've worked in over a dozen companies with 8 exits, and we've returned over $1.2 billion to investors to date. I'm very much sector agnostic. I've worked in products like orthopedic implants, heart catheters, surgical tools, and energy-based delivery systems and medical devices. I enjoy both the challenge of developing a new technology and commercializing it and bringing it to the marketplace, as well as what is required to set up and structure a company to successfully manage that process through all the challenges with clinical and regulatory quality and reimbursement, IP, the whole 9 yards. I think that's just as challenging as interesting as the technology development. Happy to be part of this group.
Peter? I think you are on mute.
On mute?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right. Okay. Hi. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me for this session. And my background, I came from a trained cardiologist in China and went to Yale Business School and get a degree, and then get into this venture capital side, and about 20 years, and the total career in the medical field is about 30 years. So for the medical device journey, I've been invested in the a few companies in cardiovascular, ophthalmology, and dermatology area, and some of them already exited, and some are in the process of developing. So very happy to be part of this group. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, all the panelists. So my first question is, at this point, because of the pandemic, we have a lot of smart and well-resourced individuals interested in working in healthcare. How should they find and evaluate medical device opportunities in any order?
I'm happy to start, Prathamesh. Thank you. Well, I think that the primary avenue for developing a new technology is identifying the problem and identifying what the need is in the marketplace. In this case, the surgical suite or the ICU or wherever your medical setting is, to find out what the problem is, understand the problem, what the requirements are, and how you might be able to develop a new technology to address that situation. My own personal experience with that is I'm not a doctor like Peter or Xiang, but I like to hang out with them. So I think having a lot of conversations with doctors, surgeons I've worked with in the past, to see what their challenges are on a daily basis. As Xiang said, he's in there every day treating patients. And so that's a invaluable source of information to get that kind of perspective of what the challenges he's seeing every day, and what can I bring to the table to help him address that. So I think having the conversations with the frontline healthcare providers, and as much as possible getting there in the room with them to see what they're doing, is a method that I found very successful for identifying new opportunities.
Yeah, I like to contribute my thoughts on this topic. I think globally and locally, there are two different topics. And because our firm is primarily focusing on China, so which is a developing country like India. And from that perspective, after the pandemic, I think, especially for the medical device perspective, I think the very hard point is diagnostic medical devices. And from the developing countries, from developed countries like the United States, I think the robotic and the remote control devices are really, really hard. This is reflected by the stock market. You can go look at that. And for you know, on the extension of that part, I think some medical device related, like a reagent, and for the radiology imaging, also very, very, very popular. And one of the portfolio companies in China focus on imaging, remote imaging diagnostics. It's very popular, very hot. Okay, thank you.
I want to give a point. You know, the pandemic definitely has changed the landscape of how we deliver healthcare here, not only here in the in the United States, but also worldwide. Just give you one example on the clinical side. Before the pandemics, we barely are able to see patients virtually. I mean, even though telemedicine, they have been here for more than 20 years in this country, but the insurance, agencies or the institutional policies, the restriction, etc. I mean, in our practice, we barely see any patients through telemedicine. But do you believe the numbers right now at Stanford? In our clinic, we're seeing our patients, 99%, 99% seeing patients via telemedicine. That's unimaginable. So there's a lot of challenges the pandemic brought to us, but there are opportunities too it presents. The telemedicine so far, we have been able to meet most of the needs from our patients. They're satisfying. In fact, many of them are very, very grateful. Imagine that you're living from out of state or in Central Valley, just here in California. You do not need to take time off anymore. You do not need to bring your cars on the highway anymore. No more CO2 emissions. A 4 hours driving now becomes 30 minutes of visits. It absolutely has changed the way how we interact with patients. But there's limitations. We can't land our hands on the patients anymore. That gave us opportunities for medical device innovations. There are tools being developed right now that we can guide the patient to initiate self-initiated physical exams. In fact, I've been talking to companies for developing those tools in the past couple of weeks that they can help doctors to really, not just the wearable devices, but also more specifically, for example, a guidance, for doing a knee joint examinations or shoulder joint examination, etc. Those medical devices that can help us shorten the distance between the physicians and the patients. I want to add one more point is that in the histories of medical device innovations, most of the time the ideas are initiated by the clinicians. Sometimes, of course, non-physicians who have fundamental understandings of medical needs, etc. And you form a startup and you get the prototype going, and the VCs comes in, and then you grow. And I think the role of the medical side of the physician is irreplaceable for the innovations. Obviously, we need collaborative effort from everybody. Engineers is just as important as clinicians, and of course we need a management team and etc. Everybody come together and reach our promised land.
My next question is on intellectual property. Once you identify a good problem to solve, you want to make sure you have strong intellectual property. So I wanted to ask all the panelists, based on the stage of the company, how much impact does IP have in deciding ideation, maybe seeking investment, or in later stages once you're discussing a merger or an acquisition after the startup has a lot of sales? Starting from John.
Thank you, Prathamesh. Yeah, I think fundamentally from a viability standpoint and a investment standpoint, any startup needs to have a good IP portfolio. That said, it was insightful from you to break it into different stages. Before going out and shopping your startup around, you certainly need to file IP. You need to capture your idea and the development and invention you have. But I'll share you one story. About a year ago, I was pitching to an angel group, and one of the investors said, "Well, it seems like your issued patent is about 12 years old. It doesn't have much life left on it." And I said, "Well, yeah, that's very correct. But in my experience in the medical device startup world, you file your patents with your idea and your first prototype. And then between that and your commercial product, there are many changes that occur and innovations that happen along the way, and more patents get filed. So the first patent you file is rarely the patent that is totally defining and protecting your commercial product. So it's a process that evolves along with the growth of the company. many times you'll take a product to the market and do your first clinical study and get feedback from clinicians and find out you need to make a few changes. You make those changes, you patent those changes, and you go back out. So it's an evolving process. And I want to reinforce one thing that Xiang said, which is yes, the majority of these ideas do come directly from the clinician, the surgeon, and in my experience in a medical device startup structure, it's very, very important to have a doctor as a chief medical officer, somebody, a part of the company who's keeping that focus foremost in the company's progress, and it doesn't get sidetracked and going down a pathway that isn't really totally focused on both the patient's needs and the surgical user's needs.
Peter, as an investor, what is your opinion on intellectual property?
All right, that's a very good question. Actually, I think, and also the different scenarios. And in the United States, and I think investors prefer you have a creative, first-hand innovative innovation. Basically, the IP is critical for the startups. I think, however, on the other hand, in the country like China, we invest a number of deals. The IP important, but not the first priority, because the creation ability is not as strong as in the United States. It's relatively weak. However, the market is huge. There are a lot of the underdeveloped market. So that's kind of for the relatively later stage companies. We are more concerned about the manufacturability, the marketing sales channel. So based on the two things, I think the IP can be put in the second priority. So we are more concerned about the ability to sell product, to get us through of regulatory and etc. And because of the market, the size, like India, China, and I think the local manufacturer or local entrepreneurs have some advantage in terms of the service, in terms of relationship, in terms of the culture, etc. So, and in different scenarios, I think we have different strategies to deal with. Thank you.
Dr. Xiang, would you like to add any thoughts to that?
Well, I think Peter has pretty much summarized all, and then John has, did an excellent presentation on your side. I just want to maybe one more comment is that, of course, IP is critical for a lot of startups here in the United States. The IP, however, could come from two sides. One is from the engineering side. How do you make the stuff? How do you put the logistics, everything together? On the other side, finding a clinical indication is also very, very important. You can have the best tools in the world, but you need to find a unique treatment scenarios. And then I think that is also a critical. For example, I have recently involved in a project treating allergies, which is a huge problem in the United States. And then there's a group of innovators in the Bay Area. They have spoken to the ENT doctors in the field. They learned that there's a very small nerve in the inside the nose, underneath the mucosa. They might be involved in the allergy pathology. And that knowledge is critical for the startup to develop a cryoablation device that goes into the nose. They basically freeze the nerve terminals underneath the submucosa and got excellent benefit for allergy treatment. Their companies, I think, was formed about 3 years ago. They were just bought by Medtronic. I think Peter may know that company. I think you're part of the investors, and they had excellent exit. This example gives you idea that the patent could be in the device itself, but also could be in the clinical scenario as indications, as well as critical, both of them.
Mhm. How do each one of you approach regulatory and reimbursement for medical devices, like globally and also in US specifically? Starting with John.
That's a great question, and I like that Peter keeps bringing in the global perspective on these questions. Well, I think these days, particularly in the United States, where reimbursement is the biggest issue, the regulatory and reimbursement really go hand in hand. It used to be kind of separate pathways and separate approaches, but a smart startup is going to develop a strategy that addresses both of these areas, because there is a need to provide evidence for regulatory approval. There's a need to provide evidence for reimbursement approval or reimbursement payments. And that evidence is always in the form of clinical data. And if you don't put a strategy together that ties these two, you're going to end up doing twice the amount of work or 3 times the amount of work to get that evidence. And if you put a strategy together early where you're tying them together, you're likely going to reduce the amount of work you have to do, because you are able to collect data to support your regulatory approval and to get reimbursement. And one of the straightforward strategies with any product is to look at the competition and look at the predicate devices. Obviously, if you're developing a product for the FDA that's a 510(k) device, the predicates are what you're going to use to show equivalency and get approval. But even if you're going after a PMA product, looking at the competition is very important, because you can see what kind of clinical study they used to get their PMA device reviewed and approved. And that can give you a strong indication of what kind of study you'll likely have to use you'll have to follow to collect the evidence to get FDA to approve. So looking at the competition is a strong strategy for a fundamental drafting of a regulatory and reimbursement strategy.
Peter, what are your thoughts on regulatory and reimbursement in the Asian market? How do you guys take that into account prior to investment?
All right, that's a very, very good question. Actually, for us, I think that's critical to when we look at the startup or whether or not you make an investment. I would suggest, for every single startup entrepreneur in the medical device field, even before you start the startup, I think you should put the design or product, any idea or thinking, you should think about first the regulatory and the reimbursement scenario in the future. That's very important. Sometimes because it's very costly to develop product, and if you don't put the regulatory or reimbursement, your product maybe get approved from FDA. You can hit the market. However, you will face a huge challenge from reimbursement. I witnessed a number of the entrepreneurs in the Silicon area, and they have really had a hard time in later. So to face the reimbursement, I think, as I said, there are 2 different scenarios in China and the United States. However, as far as I know, so in China, there are less 5% of these products have no reimbursement. Very, very small percentage. For the huge percentage of device, you have to get approved. Otherwise, you cannot survive in China. So reimbursement is a big problem, and also you have to consider that ahead. And in the United States, I think there's a big number for the entrepreneurs, even though the commercial insurance system is well developed. But however, I think you have to consider about that. So for the commercial, for other financial funding resources, how to reimburse your product, or even for patient. That's the key factor. for I think for entrepreneurs and also for investors.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with both John and Peter. It is definitely something you have to think about it before you start on something. But on the other hand, for certain disease, when we lack of therapies, or when we lack of comprehensive understanding of how we're going to treat it, the new devices that comes out, the new treatment that comes out in the beginning, they're at disadvantage because it takes a while for the insurance companies or CMS to start to think about whether to reimburse them or not. For example, I'm just talking about my own specialties. Back pain in young people in 40s, the discogenic pain accounts for about 60% of why we visit ER. But we don't have really a good therapies for back pain due to discogenic problem. Most of the devices that have been developed in the past have failed in the end, not because they're not good. They're good. They provide some sort of benefits for some patients, but not to a point that you can see clear-cut benefits, to the next level, such that there's no reimbursement. And most of the patients, when there's no reimbursement, they have to pay by themselves, unless this is a kind of a game changers. They're not going to be able to afford it, or they're not going to be willing to pay for it. And that kind of killed the medical device industries for that respect. So right now on the market, there's no good therapies for discogenic back pain. It's a huge market. It's multiple billions, $1 billion of business, because we have so many people, hundreds of millions of people have it. So it is kind of high risk, directions that certain companies, obviously the big one, the big players, they are developing techniques, and then hoping that one of those devices could, give us next levels of pain control, pain management. And then they have good data come out, and they can convince the regulatory agencies to start to reimburse. And I think that's kind of just another way to spin it. In a nutshell, regulatory approval is extremely important. It's critical for your survival. But if you have a deep pocket, or if you want to diverse your investment or your innovations repertoires, then you definitely could explore that possibility for a bigger market.
Prathamesh, I want to add one more comment there. Both Peter and Xiang made me think about with their insightful thoughts. As much as we've talked about getting the input from the clinician and understanding the clinical needs and staying focused on that, what's become very clear in the medical device industry is you need to understand the economics and where the dollars are these days. And your reimbursement strategy has to take into account what money is being spent on your market right now and how your product is going to move that money around. Because if you're going to bring a new product into that market, you're expecting some of it to come to you in your company. But if that's the case, you're going to have to save some money somewhere else. So that economic analysis is becoming just as important for medical device development as your impact on the health of that patient. And the reduction in complications is one area where you can say we're going to save money, and that's going to be part of our economics. Displacing other procedures that are more expensive is one way that you can show you're going to make money, and also displace some costs elsewhere, because it really needs to be a win-win, that you're going to make money and you're going to reduce costs somewhere else. If you're just taking money away from somebody else who's selling a product and you're not lowering the overall costs, it's going to be a much harder product to bring into the market than sell, than if you're able to demonstrate that you are able to reduce the overall costs to that patient population, to the insurance company, to the hospital.
Thank you, John. So Dr. Xiang, I think you have to leave. That is okay. Peter, you were saying something?
Oh,
Yeah,
I
I
just
have.
want to.
I have a add-on patient to come in about 10 minutes or so, but I'm here, and I just have to excuse myself for 5 minutes in the middle. So go ahead.
Okay.
Oh, I mean, so I just wanted to just 2 cents for following the Xiang. Actually, so our strategy when we look at the startup, so we are focusing on whether it's clinical driven. The need is from the what's your motivation for the physicians to use this device? Why use it? Where is the value, clinically and economically? So I think all these assessment should be made before you kick off the long journey of an entrepreneur. So it's very, very important. So that's what I want to add to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So a lot of people who are outside healthcare think that because of COVID-19 pandemic, there must be a lot of money flowing into healthcare. But on the contrary, hospitals are running on razor thin margins because all the acute procedures are not happening. So in such a situation, how do you see investment landscape changing over the next few years? And what is your advice to entrepreneurs on things that they should pursue?
Peter's got the money. I want him to go first.
All right. Okay. And just I've been thinking, sitting in the home in Silicon Valley. So basically, we have a daily conference call with the portfolios in China. So far, we have 25 portfolio companies in healthcare service, in medical device, and also in new drug development. And also the fourth area is for the healthcare related technology. So this question is very important for all the portfolio companies. We almost discuss it every day. So how for the company, I think the critical things is save every single dollar you can. So because I think down the road is going to be a hard time as well. And also because of the income, because the whole social networking change, I think for these companies, especially for the R&D and healthcare service businesses, I think they are going to be impacted hugely by the pandemic. So for the R&D, it's kind of a little bit better because if you get a funding already, you just do it. And also save money. Try to preserve as much as possible in your pocket. And for like the company who are looking for new fund, I think my feeling is that the valuation, pre-money valuation, basically cut 30 to 50% already. So this is a direct impact. And also some companies, I think, because of the pandemic, has revealed some drawbacks for the whole healthcare industry. I think you may think about how to shift your idea towards to, I think, the popular area like the vaccine. Some device, as we mentioned, related with how to prevent and diagnostic these areas. And well, that's the situation. That's basically.
That's very good comment. Thanks, Peter.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Peter.
Okay. Are you hearing? Good. Where are the people?
Any final comments?
I just make a real quick comment on the investment and money.
Can we pick like 3 sentences for everybody?
Yeah, just real quick. I'd see that it's much more challenging for medical devices to get started, and the entrepreneur needs to focus on alternate funding to get to the point where they're ready to collect patient data, whether that's grants, angels, or family offices. That's really where I see the investment dollars coming from. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Dr.
Excellent.
Xiang, any
Okay,
final?
yes.
Thank you
Yes,
very
well,
much.
I think one word Peter already mentioned is every dollar counts now. So I think we just have to be mindful for the entrepreneurs that before your product can't meet the patient. So cost saving, be more efficient. I think it's all very important.
Great. Thank you all for the great panel. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
so much.
David. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Prathamesh,